I have to ask Jill, particularly with your Watergate experience. Watergate was an attempt at the highest level to hold our nation's leaders accountable. What does accountability look like for you after all of this? And assuming that Trump pardons virtually everybody in his administration and himself, what does accountability look like?
Well, the pardons are troubling because, again, that's an unlimited power that the Constitution grants to the president on the assumption that the president will be a believer in the rule of law and will not be pardoning money launderers and rapists and people who abuse their power in government. But let me just go back to Watergate, because back then I believed that we should indict Richard Nixon while he was the sitting president. We had impeccable evidence of his guilt. We had him in his own words on tapes. We had testimony from John Dean, which was confirmed. Every detail he said was confirmed when we listened to tapes. And he would have been convicted by any reasonable jury. And so if we had done that, I think that there would have been a message sent to future miscreants who might get elected that I better avoid actually violating the law. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing at Justice, where Jeanine Pirro may have been told by her staff, I'm not going to go to court to bring that case because I'll get disbarred. And then I'm done forever with my career. Yeah. And the same thing is true, and I also not only thought Nixon should be indicted while he was sitting president, but he resigned and became a private citizen in plenty of time for us to indict him as a citizen. And again, had we done that, and we would have, but our leader, Archibald Cox, had been fired in the Saturday Night Massacre, and Leon Jaworski, who took over, said, no, I think impeachment is the right procedure. And truthfully, back then, impeachment was a bipartisan effort, and it would have worked if he hadn't resigned. So it was a legitimate way for accountability. But in today's world, impeachment is no longer a viable option. We cannot, in the current makeup of Congress, get to an impeachable offense. Yeah. That would have impeachment charges and a conviction. So we no longer have that as a backup, and only the criminal courts can give us that kind of accountability and justice. And yes, when Democrats take over, they can remove all the gold, but the money has already been spent. Millions and billions of dollars in gold glued into the White House that make me nauseous to look at. Sure. Gold paint on 24 karat gold paint on a statue. Why are we spending money on that when children are starving? When we're taking away SNAP benefits and gilding Washington? And we're spending billions for the extra protection in Washington, D.C., which is absurd waste of money. We should not have the National Guard patrolling D.C. And there are just so many things that are policy-wise and economically.
Well, I hate to shamelessly plug yet another recent column I did on National Guard in D.C., Jill. The numbers are there, too. And guess what? They haven't made a dent in violent crime in D.C. And now we're up to close to 5,000 troops, which have been locked into what, 2029 or something? Yeah. Ridiculous.
Till he's out of office.
Yeah. Which makes you wonder if he thinks he needs troops to stay in office. But I want to, before we go, I've asked this of a couple of lawyers I respect that have come on. Let me ask you your opinion on the Supreme Court and what to do about it. Are you for reforming the court, or is that a slippery slope to something else?
I have mixed feelings on that because, of course, it is a slippery slope. If you take the path of, I'm going to add 3 more justices, and I'm going to only allow that to happen when a Democrat is president. Then when the next Republican comes in Well, we'll increase it 3, and then you get to an unwieldy number of members of the court. If you put term limits on, or age limits, that makes some sense, and it would play out over time. If you create a system where people are appointed because there's term limits, you would have everybody who gets elected president would have some opportunity to appoint new people. That to me makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to solve the problem right now, because you can't fire people who have been confirmed for life appointments. Right. And unfortunately, we have a very relatively young court. I mean, there's a couple who are old and might be forced out, but they won't be forced out except by age or resignation, or disability, or impeachment, which of course is a legitimate way to deal with some of the corruption and conflicts of interest that are going on at the court. But I think for now, we're kind of stuck with it. And the court, I keep thinking, they're going to wake up and they're going to see what they have empowered. And they're going to very carefully define the immunity that they granted, which only applies technically. Total immunity is for his absolutely constitutionally guaranteed things, like granting a pardon. That's immunity. Declaring war, that's immunity. But things like slamming E. Jean Carroll, defaming her, he doesn't have immunity for that. That has nothing to do with his job as president. Right. And yes, giving a press conference and from the White House is part of his job, but not covering something like a personal lawsuit. That's not part of his job. So I think where we are in terms of the Supreme Court is we're locked in for quite a while with a really bad court that is not doing, even those who say, well, I am a textualist. Yeah, except when it says, for a militia, they don't use the word militia when it comes to guns, even though that is the premise for the Second Amendment. They go however they want based on the outcome they want. And that's scary to me. And now, by the way, going to Blanche, he's talking about the Comstock Act being brought back to life. And so there's a lot going on that the courts are allowing, but thank heavens, for the most part, the courts, including Trump-appointed judges, are saying, no, that's not, you can't.
It's true. And it's particularly true on when he attempts to meddle with elections already. It's like 20-0 so far on what he's doing.